Hello, everyone. Welcome in. It's Kat. So, today, while scrolling on Reddit, I have found 15 of the most messed up family stories. While I read these stories, I will have relaxing Minecraft gameplay running in the background. Some of these stories are honestly hard to hear. They're about betrayal, disappearances, and choices people made because they didn't feel like they had any other option. Enough of that. Let's ease into the first story together. Story 1. My grandfather, on my dad's side, passed away from a massive heart attack at the young age of 40 when my dad was about 10 or 12. Sometime after the funeral, my grandmother started seeing a man named Mitch, whom my dad and his siblings absolutely despised growing up. I would occasionally hear mentions of Mitch, but when I got older, I asked my mom about him since my dad rarely talks about his past. My mom told me that Mitch was essentially a con artist who eventually married my grandmother. Over the years, he drained her finances and forced them to file for bankruptcy not once, not twice, but 3, going on 4 times. Apparently, he was also extremely abusive to my dad and his siblings. That lasted until my dad was around 17 or 18, at which point, and this is a story my great aunt loves to tell, when she's had a few margaritas, my dad finally snapped. He chased Mitch through the house with a baseball bat, forcing him to hide under a bed. Eventually, my grandmother managed to get their marriage annulled and somehow reverted to her previous last name so she could resume receiving military benefits from my late grandfather. Story 2, paternal side. My grandpa was a Vietnam veteran who went missing in action for several weeks. To this day, no one really knows what happened during that time. When he eventually returned, he struggled with heavy drinking and reckless behavior. My father and his brothers would often have to search the ditches near the local bar to find him passed out. One night, my grandpa woke up from a nightmare and, in his confusion, realized he was choking my grandma. Incidents like that severely damaged my dad's relationship with him. While my dad resents his father for many things, it's also clear that a lot of his behavior was a result of untreated PTSD. Because of that, I don't really take sides. Maternal side. My mom was an unplanned pregnancy, conceived out of wedlock, which drastically changed my grandparents' lives. This was the 1950s. They were poor and unhappy together. Eventually, another baby was on the way, and since they were already struggling to feed my mom, my grandmother considered seeking an illegal procedure to terminate the pregnancy. She had already gone as far as preparing for it when she suddenly realized she couldn't go through with it. I'm so glad she didn't, because that baby turned out to be my aunt, who is one of the kindest, most genuine people I know. There's also a rumor that my maternal grandfather's father performed certain medical procedures in the back room of a bar after the war. I don't believe it, but I'd love to ask my grandpa about it. Unfortunately, my mom has sworn me to secrecy. Story 3. I'm late, but here it goes. My mom's first husband was an abusive alcoholic. He beat my mom and my sisters daily, and she lived in fear for years, too scared to leave. When she finally did, she ran all the way across the country with my sisters and started a new life. Eventually, she met my dad and had me. Because of everything she had been through, she became a tough woman. She wouldn't take any crap from anyone. My dad knew that, and the one time he raised a hand to her, she grabbed a broomstick and beat him until he was in tears. He never tried it again. Fast forward several years. My dad was cheating on my mom. She knew about it, but never said a word for about a year. He was seeing another woman until that woman got into a terrible car accident and nearly died. Nearly after that, my dad obviously stopped seeing her. They eventually divorced after my dad continued cheating on her for years. Fast forward to just a few years ago. I was talking with my mom about old stories, and somehow the conversation turned to my dad's affairs. We kept talking and we got onto the topic of that first woman, the one who had been in the accident. That's when my mom casually said, "Well, maybe someone messed with her brakes," and then she just walked away. I'm pretty sure my mom paid someone to sabotage my dad's mistress's car. Story 4. My great-grandmother was institutionalized in an insane asylum from 1928 until 1978, when she passed away. For her entire life, everyone believed she had died in childbirth. The truth, however, was far more unsettling. My great-grandfather had committed her, likely due to what we now recognize as postpartum depression. My grandmother and her 2 sisters never met her. My great-grandfather kept the secret, convinced that if people knew what had happened to their mother, no one would want to marry his daughters. He carried that secret with him until my grandfather married into the family. That's when he finally told him the truth. My grandfather, in turn, kept the secret throughout his entire marriage to my grandmother, who only passed away last year. Eventually, though, the weight of it got to him, and out of guilt, he confided in my mother. To this day, no one outside of my grandfather, mother, father, and myself knows the real story. Story 5. This one is so sad, and I still regret not being kinder to her. I went to an all-girls private school with Woo kilts. There was one girl who stood out, super needy, always looking for someone to latch onto. If you were nice to her, she'd become attached, almost impossible to shake. I liked her well enough, but I wasn't particularly nice to her because of that. Even as a day student, I noticed something odd. She never seemed to go home. She only left when the school fully closed, like for Christmas. During the summer, she was sent off to camp. I thought it was a little strange, but didn't dwell on it. After all, there were plenty of girls, especially international students, who stayed year-round, and she was from the US. On weekends, the boarding students were bused to the local mall. They could shop, watch movies, and then get bused back. One day, she got caught shoplifting during one of these trips. The school expelled her for it. It was complete bullshit. If I, a day student, had been caught doing the same thing on a weekend, nothing would have happened. At worst, she should have just lost mall privileges. Years passed, and I barely thought about her. Then one day, I was talking to my friend's mom, who used to work for a local psychiatrist. I'm pretty sure it was some kind of breach for her to tell me this, but the reason she was never home was that her family didn't want her when she was just a little kid, far too young to be left babysitting. Her toddler brother crawled onto the pool cover and drowned. Her parents blamed her from that moment on. They wanted as little to do with her as possible. She had been seeing the local psychiatrist for guilt and abandonment issues, no surprise there, but despite everything, she was a surprisingly well-adjusted young woman. Then, when the school expelled her, her family took her back to the US and had her committed. It's disgusting what some parents are capable of. Story 6. My brother and I have different fathers, but the same mother. When we were very young, his dad shot and killed my dad, then buried his body in the Santa Cruz Mountains. He was convicted and sent to San Quentin. Over the years, my mother was always vague about the details. Little by little, things didn't add up. Something inside me told me to look into it when I was an adult, so I did. I went through the case files of what was, at the time, a high-profile murder in the Bay Area in 1976. What I found was disturbing. Everyone involved, my father, my brother's father, and even my mother, had connections to heavy drug use and the Hells Angels. That's when I discovered the truth. My mother had testified against my brother's dad to keep herself out of prison. The exact details of her involvement in my father's death I will never know. Her plea bargain allowed her to walk free, and her testimony was completely redacted. I've never confronted my mother about it, not because I don't care, but because she didn't turn out to be a horrible parent. She clearly struggled a lot during that time, and it's taken me years to privately come to terms with what little I do know. In the end, I chose to forgive her. Story 7. My aunt on my father's side was trapped in an abusive marriage, and no one did anything to help her. The final straw wasn't when her husband beat her so badly that her kidneys failed. It wasn't even when he burned their son for misbehaving. A lot of people don't understand the level of abuse. This was in the 80s and 90s, a time when there was little to no support for Asian victims of rape and domestic violence in the UK. The worst part was that he didn't even have to hide it. He would beat my aunt in public, even at her workplace, over the smallest things, like the handle of a teacup facing the wrong way, or for simply talking to another man. It came to my mother's attention when I was staying over at their house. He threatened my aunt, and I, being a kid, said that wasn't a nice thing to say. In response, he punched me in the stomach. When my mother found out that I had tried to protect my aunt and cousins, she lost it. My mother is half Scottish, half mixed-race Indian. My grandmother is from East Asia. That fiery, protective side took over. She stormed over to my aunt's house, waited until no one was around, and physically dragged my aunt and cousins out. Then she drove them straight to Manchester. I had to take a few days off school after that. A grown man kicking a 12-year-old in the stomach and crotch hard enough to need medical observation isn't exactly a minor thing. Luckily, I only had a hematoma. If things had gone differently, I could have lost a testicle or suffered internal bleeding. That's when we found out something even worse. My father's side of the family had known about the abuse all along. They never spoke up because in Indian culture, divorce was considered a disgrace. They wanted to save face. Even after my mother exposed the situation, they still tried to placate my aunt's husband, acting like he just needed to be reasoned with. My mother wasn't having any of it. She called the cops on him, but in those days, nothing much could be done. He started driving past our house regularly, and my parents grew terrified that he might try to kidnap me. In the end, they sent me to boarding school for my own safety. Eventually, he left the UK and moved to the US. The worst part was the damage he did to his own children. Abuse can ruin a person in 2 ways. You can beat them down, or you can spoil them so much that they become hollow inside. My older cousin, the one who was abused, grew up to become a lawyer. The younger one, the one his father never hurt, turned into a spoiled mess. His father kept buying him expensive gifts, shielding him from any hardship, and it destroyed him in a different way. What I learned from all this is how abuse really works, how it poisons good, well-meaning people into supporting cruelty, how people look the other way for the sake of tradition, and how much the world has changed. In the 80s, his behavior wasn't even considered a big deal. In the 90s, people finally started to act, but only because someone was brave enough to report it. Story 8. My mom once told me a story about my uncle, one that no one in the family likes to talk about. Back when he was a teenager, he and his friends went to an older gentleman's house after a night at the bar. At some point, all of my uncle's friends left, leaving him alone with this man. That's when things took a dark turn. The man started making advances toward my uncle. My uncle wasn't interested and tried to leave, but the guy got aggressive and refused to let him go. The situation escalated into a physical altercation, and in the struggle, my uncle ended up stabbing the man to death. He was arrested and put on trial. During that time, he was locked up in Rikers Island. According to my mom, it was a pretty big news story at the time, though I've never been able to find any records of it. In the end, he was found not guilty and was released, but after that, no one in the family ever spoke about it again. As far as my mom knows, none of his kids. None of my cousins have any idea that it ever happened. Story 9. My entire family kept my twin a secret from me until she sought me out when we were 16. She had been adopted and moved to the US as a child. I guess it's not the most horrifying secret, but what is messed up is that no one in my family has ever given me a straight answer about why they gave her away. It wasn't like they were struggling. We weren't so poor that they couldn't have raised 2 kids at the same time. But whenever I asked, I got the same cold response. It happened. Stop asking. Despite being raised in completely different families, mine loud, chaotic, full of cursing and fighting, hers a strict Catholic upbringing, we were eerily alike. We had the same mannerisms, the same way of cursing, and we even pursued similar career paths. She was incredibly gifted and became an MD at a young age. Then one day she died suddenly. They suspected lung QT syndrome, LQTS. You'd think at some point during medical school she would have checked herself, run an ECG, and caught it, but she didn't. Because of her death, I got tested and found out that I had it too. Because of her, I got treatment. Because of her, I'm likely still alive today. Her husband couldn't handle her death. When I was in the US after she passed, I was getting out of my car when I heard the gunshot. He had killed himself. I have never been the same since I lost her. The real secret here is that I never told my parents any of this. All they know is that she passed away. Whatever happened all those years ago, why they gave her up, I will never know. When I told them about her death, they barely reacted. It was like they didn't care, so I didn't tell them anything else. I'm sure my family has even more dark secrets, but I don't want to know them. Everyone hates each other. Nothing is ever good enough. My brother and I are always caught in the middle, blamed for things we had nothing to do with, even when we're not in the same country. I don't care about them. I just miss my twin. Story 10. An unfortunate but true tale. My grandmother was adopted into a wealthy family when she was young. She was spoiled, always getting what she wanted, and over time she became blind to the needs of others. Eventually she was kicked out and had to fend for herself. That's when she had my uncles, my mom, and my aunt. By the time my aunt was born, my grandmother was deep into her drinking and partying phase. One cold winter night, she left the house to go out drinking. On her way out, she left the door open. My aunt, still very young, crawled outside into the freezing cold. She was found frozen to death the next morning. My grandmother never spent a single day in jail, never faced any consequences. Instead, she turned to religion, convincing herself that believing in God would help her repent and secure her place in heaven. No one in the family ever talks about what happened, but I have visited my aunt's gravestone. Story 11. I have too many. Mom's side first. My mom is adopted. In her early 20s, she found her biological mother, called her up, and got hung up on. Her bio mom completely denied being related to her. Then the woman's husband called my mom back. He told her straight up that she wasn't crazy. He gave my mom all the details she wanted. Her bio mom had been married, but had multiple affairs, got pregnant, and had no idea who the father was, so my mom was put up for adoption. The best guess they had for her biological father was some guy named Joe, a drummer in a band. My mom's 2 older brothers were also adopted. The younger one died at 21 after a freak accident at his job. Massive amounts of piping fell and crushed him. It was a pipe manufacturing plant or something like that. After he passed away, we found my great-uncle's old love letters to his male lover. This was back in a time when that kind of relationship was considered unacceptable. Then there's my great-great-great, or something like that, grandfather. He was killed in a duel in Iowa. The duel was supposed to be fake. His horses kept wandering onto a neighbor's property, and things got tense between them. Eventually, they came to an understanding. The town, however, still thought they were feuding, so they decided to stage a fake duel on Main Street with blank rounds. Guess who showed up with real bullets? My mom still has the newspaper clipping. Also, one of my ancestors was a 33rd degree Freemason of the Scottish Rite, or however that's properly said in Freemason terms, Dad's side. One of my uncles killed someone in a drunk driving accident. After that, he spiraled into meth addiction and has been in and out of jail ever since. He still lives in my grandma's basement, and I'm pretty sure he's used it in the barn to cook meth. It pisses me off that he brought that kind of thing around my grandmother. Another one of my dad's brothers knocked up a girl when he was 16. Funny thing is, she originally had her sights on my dad, but he wanted nothing to do with her, so she settled for his brother instead. She got pregnant, and since my family is very Catholic and hers was very Baptist, a shotgun wedding was inevitable. The only problem was the reception. Catholics throw wild wedding parties with drinking, dancing, and music, while Baptists hate all three. They managed to agree on cutting one of them out, but I don't remember which one. Anyway, they got married. She gave birth, and their first son was autistic. A few years later, she got pregnant again. The second child was also autistic. She completely flipped out and disappeared for months, leaving my uncle alone with two very young autistic sons in the middle of nowhere, Midwest America, where no one had even heard of autism, let alone how to help a struggling single father. Eventually, she came back. My cousins are in their 30s now. My uncle is still married to that woman, even though she steals their kids' meds at family gatherings. She usually shows up completely out of it, messed up and incoherent, annoying everyone in the process. Nobody likes her. Then there's the lost sibling mystery. Before my mom, my dad dated a woman who later claimed she was pregnant. Then she vanished. No one knows if she was telling the truth or not, so I might have a half-sibling out there somewhere. Bonus. The same thing happened to my husband before we met, so he might have a mystery child out there too. Grand finale. My mom got pregnant with me after being with my dad for 3 years. My dad, being Catholic, wanted a shotgun wedding. My mom, having already been married twice before the age of 23, decided she wasn't doing that again. So what did my dad do? He just didn't tell his family about me for 2 years. Eventually, my parents decided to get married. That's when my dad finally told my grandmother by mailing her a picture of me along with a letter that I can only imagine was the most awkward thing my father has ever written. Story 12. My uncle ran away to California with his brothers, my dad's wife. My dad was completely clueless. He thought they had both just moved out there since they had always wanted to go, but he couldn't because of his business. Then he found out she had stolen from him to pay for the Jeep they took on their way there. Their other brother, the third brother, had even warned my dad. He told him he had seen them fooling around, but my dad refused to believe it. 2 years later, my dad went to visit them. By then, he had already filed for divorce after coming home from work one day to find all her stuff gone. He had accepted that she had left, but he still didn't see the full picture. Then, while he was hanging out in the pool at their house, she finally laid it all out. You realize your brother and I are together, right? That's why we ran away together. The straightforward truth hit my dad like a ton of bricks. He got out of the pool. As he was walking out, my uncle called after him, "Hey, where are you going?" "I made drinks." My dad didn't even turn around. He just said, "You're dead to me." Then he took a cab to the airport and got on the first flight home. Years later, he forgave them, but it's still pretty messed up to steal your brother's wife. Story 13. Not mine, but a kid I knew growing up. He came from a super religious family with a strict military father. His dad was so uptight that he wouldn't even allow me, or any male for that matter, to sit next to his wife or daughter at the dinner table. The whole family was suffocating under his rules. I remember the relief they would all feel every few weeks when he left for military assignments in California. It was like they could finally breathe. Fast forward 17 years, the dad is about to become a general in the military, the kids are grown, getting ready to leave for college. Then, out of nowhere, he drops a bombshell. He has had a second family in California the entire time, and he's choosing them over his original family. His wife, who had spent decades supporting him, raising his kids, and playing the role of the perfect military spouse, was devastated. She was nearly 60 years old, suddenly single, and realizing her whole life had been a lie. The only upside was that in the divorce, she got a huge chunk of his pension and benefits. But even with that, nothing could make up for the betrayal. Story 14. My whole family is convinced that my uncle killed my aunt. He told everyone she had committed suicide, but there were 2 bullet holes in the living room. She had supposedly shot herself in the bathroom. My aunt was the type of person who wrote handwritten letters to everyone. Even at almost 60 years old, she still wrote to all her high school friends, but her suicide note was typed on an old computer in their bedroom, instead of being handwritten like everything else she had ever written. Worse, the timestamp of the note didn't match up with the 911 call. It was written after the call was made. Within a week, my uncle destroyed the computer. We never told my mom. It was her sister. But when we listened to the 911 tapes, we heard my aunt crying for help. We told the police everything, but real life isn't like the movies. They didn't do anything. To this day, my mom doesn't know about the 911 tapes. When people ask how my aunt died, we usually just say a car accident. Story 15. Danish family here. My dad told me that he believes my grandfather tried to kill his family multiple times in the 1950s to start a new one. He would plan dangerous trips and try to make it look like an accident. One time, while at their summer vacation home, the house burned down completely with everyone inside except my grandfather, who happened to be out somewhere. Fortunately, everyone escaped in time. My dad believes his father was also behind the accident that later killed his then pregnant mother, her father, and my dad's 3 sisters. It happened in a boating accident. My dad, who was only 5 years old at the time, was the sole survivor because his grandfather managed to get him on top of the overturned boat. He watched as everyone else drowned, then drifted alone in the wreckage until some fishermen found him later that night. When my dad was finally brought back, his father's reaction was surprising. He didn't cry. He didn't rush to him. He just looked shocked, almost as if he hadn't expected to see him again. 1 year later, my grandfather remarried a Danish woman who had previously been engaged to a German soldier during the Danish occupation. The soldier hadn't actually died during the war. He had a family back in Germany and broke off the engagement when he returned home. She eventually ended up marrying into my family instead. Years later, my step-grandmother told me she once owned a signed copy of Mein Kampf, but had thrown it away by the time she passed. She had spent all the money my grandfather made when he sold his engineering business. All right, yeah, that was a lot to take in. Some of these stories really stick with you, and it's kind of wild knowing these are all real people carrying this stuff around. I feel like we progressed a lot with our world in this video. I'm really curious though, which story hit you the hardest? Was there one that shocked you, made you sad, or just left you speechless? Let me know in the comments because I'll love to read them and it helps me figure out what kind of stories to bring next. If you liked this mix of Minecraft in the background and deep Reddit stories, go ahead and leave a like so more people can find the video. And if you want more long, chill story videos like this, consider subscribing. I've got a lot more lined up. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.